Everyone knows that social media is bad for society. With technology at our fingertips and in our pockets, many people believe that social media causes more problems than it solves. While I understand the concern, I don't think that one broad statement is an accurate representation of social media as a whole. However, there are some areas that need to be addressed before we can come to a definitive conclusion of how social media impacts society. The first area of concern is media effects, sort of a monkey see, monkey do ideology. This theory comes from the hypodermic needle theory, where the media injects information directly into the brain and sees an immediate effect. However, according to David Gauntlet and his article, 10 Things Wrong with the Media Effect Model, there are issues with relying solely on this method. Gauntlet argues that researchers should begin with the social problem and seek to explain it in reference to those who engage in it. The media effects approach, in this sense, comes at the problem backwards, by starting with the media and then trying to lasso connections from there on to social beings, rather than the other way around. He also mentions that the media effects model fails to look at the big picture and focuses rather on particular individuals at certain times, meaning that its targets are chosen very specifically and very selectively. It should also be noted that the media effects theory is problematic due to its decontextualized view of media content, in which a range of responses are reduced to nothing more than physical effects. In the book, Media Effects Research by Glenn Grayson Sparks, he looks at the hypodermic needle theory and how it came about in the 1950s. Part of the explanation for this outlook had to do with the psychology of the time, with its emphasis on the uniform psychological mechanism common to human beings. Little consideration was given to the possibility that different people might respond differently to the same message. It's important to note that media effects must take that possibility in consideration. For example, look at how people react to the 50 Shades of Grey movie. Some people rejoice and consider it a step forward for rights and sexual equality, while others think it's poisoning the minds of the world's youth and giving unhealthy ideas of how relationships should be. Same message, but different responses on a personal basis that vary from person to person. The other issue of concern being questionable approaches to research in which correlation does not equal causation. That being said, media effects cannot be the sole determinant of how social media impacts society. Next, I want to talk about the idea of moral panics and how that relates to social media. A moral panic occurs when the public responds to a problem that it sees as threatening the moral standards of society. Some of the key themes that seem to spark moral panics are sex, violence, drug use, language, and threats to existing social values. One example of the moral panic has to do with the Gutenberg Bible. In the Middle Ages, all the Bibles belonged to the church, and priests were the only ones who could disperse the message, as they were the only ones who could read. Johannes Gutenberg printed his own Bible, which angered the church and helped bring about the Age of Enlightenment. In this case, Gutenberg was threatening the moral standard. The church was an existing concentrated power that relied on the illiteracy of the public to keep that power. Due to Gutenberg's printing, the power was spread and spawned higher literacy. Now, we may not see this as a moral panic as literacy today is increasing. However, at the time, this challenged the very standard of society and upset the church greatly. Today, the moral panic seems to revolve more around sex, sexuality, and nudity. According to the lecture on moral panics, some of the key features of media moral panics are almost always about young people and how they should be protected and how to maintain the existing social order. As we've seen through the use of media, the social order is no longer monitored by gatekeepers who limit the availability of knowledge, but it is rather in the hands of people who constantly challenge the status quo. The technology and the times are changing, and as a result, we cannot use traditional methods to evaluate the impact of social media. Even with these two areas of concern, I personally do not think social media is bad for society. I think that sometimes bad things could happen as a result, but the way we've traditionally thought about media needs to adapt as we have. There may never be a definitive answer for this question, as it will vary person to person, but in my personal, somewhat professional opinion, I don't think media is bad for society.